We'll,
Uh,
pro- we'll
only
prolong
that
it.
my airplane isn't built for flips and turns. It's built for sedate flying.
Sedate flying. Well, the great Ronnie Daniels, Executive Director Alzheimer's, is here with us. How are you, Ronnie?
Doing good, James. How are you?
I'm doing pretty good, man. I've had an interesting week of grandkids and daughter here with me celebrating and so forth.
Nice.
And I really thought about my upkeep as I walked everywhere and kind of kept up with the grandkids. It was a lot of fun. But welcome
That's
to the
that,
show, and
thanks.
thank you for coming on such short notice.
No problem.
And I'm going to start this whole thing off with you. Um, the FDA has made an astonishing revelation and revealed to us what is that.
So they approved a drug called Aducanumab, and this is the first type of drug that will actually treat one of the underlying causes of Alzheimer's disease, which is thought to be the buildup of amyloid beta plaque in someone's brain. And so that's what this drug specifically does, is go in and attack amyloid plaque and deplete it. It's important to realize that this is not a drug that will cure Alzheimer's disease, and it's not something that can bring back destroyed cognitive function that's happened already. So it's primarily going to be used for people who are in the very early stages of Alzheimer's disease, or even in the pre-Alzheimer's stage called mild cognitive impairment. So what this is really going to require is for people to get tested much earlier to make this drug most effective. So and that's going to be the best use of this treatment, is for people to get diagnosed early on with mild cognitive impairment or early stage Alzheimer's disease, that this drug can have the best effect with them.
What are the numbers in terms of when we determine whatever that percentage of people is might be susceptible to Alzheimer's or other dementias? What are those numbers?
So that's a hard number to pinpoint exactly. We know there are over 6 million people in the United States who are living with Alzheimer's disease today. And I would probably, and this is my best guess, but probably about 30% of those individuals are in the early stage of Alzheimer's disease or mild cognitive impairment. So that's probably the audience that's going to be most effectively impacted by this new drug.
So it's again another step forward in preparing, and the key word is preparing, to understand what you might be susceptible to as you age. This is one of those steps that will get you around some of the obstacles of not knowing what to do. This is a preventive measure.
Absolutely, yeah. So one of the things that we often will encourage people to do is the first time they start to see any kind of cognitive challenges, whether that's memory loss, or it might be to start with that you can't remember the words, that you want to say, or it might be that you forget, why you've gone somewhere, or just little cognitive things like that. That's the time to go in and get checked by your doctor, because some of those things can actually be caused by other things like an infection or medication you're taking, or even a lack of sleep. And so it's important to get those things checked. But if it does happen to be related to a cognitive disorder like mild cognitive impairment or Alzheimer's disease, the earlier that we can detect that and diagnose that, the more effective that this new drug is going to be. And the other thing we know also, some incredible research happening around the world that looks at other ways that we could reduce our risk to prevent Alzheimer's through exercise, through diet, getting enough sleep. All those things can also help reduce the onset of this disease. And so the earlier that people can be diagnosed, the better, both for in case of taking aducanumab, as well as these other preventative measures that can be put into place.
So you've got years and years and lots of money that has been raised for Alzheimer's. This is really one of those kudos to the organization for all of the research that's been happening over the years and years. This is a response to all of that. Is that correct?
Absolutely. Yeah. It's something we're all very excited about, the Alzheimer's Association. When we compare this to a disease like cancer, for instance, For the last 25 to 30 years, the federal government has been putting in excess of $5 billion annually into cancer research. And we're seeing some incredible breakthroughs. I actually right now am living with cancer. I was diagnosed in January with kidney cancer, and I am forever grateful for all of the research that's gone on in cancer because it's helping me become cancer free. But in that same time frame, just 10 years ago, there was less than $400 million going to Alzheimer's research compared to $5 billion. And so we're really proud of the advocacy work that our organization has done over the last 10 years, because today, the amount of money going to Alzheimer's research annually is $3.1 billion. We're not quite there equal to cancer yet, but that's an incredible increase in the amount of research that's going on now because of funding that's coming through the National Institutes of Health and other pharmaceutical companies that have also put in their own resources, like Biogen, who is the one that developed.
We have a little glitch somewhere. Well, I'm going to take this time. I can't hear you. You're froze up on us. I'm going to take this time to introduce Chloe Armstead. This is my granddaughter, and she's about to immerse herself in college. And I wanted her to come on so she could at least listen to great minds. Obviously, I've got the greatest mind, but I wanted her to come on and take a listen as she prepares to move forward in going to college and learn and understand about the nursing career. Welcome, Chloe. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Good. Don't mute your microphone because it'll break up our audio at a later time. So just keep it unmuted. Welcome to the show, and we have Dr. Bill Cosgrove, who's a great specialist. I'm going to come back to you, Ronnie, and let you finish.
We sorry about my wonderful internet just zapped out on me for a second. I apologize for that.
Well, we depend on. I want you to meet my granddaughter, Chloe Armstead. This is Executive Director Ronnie Daniels. Chloe.
Nice to meet you, Chloe.
Hi. Nice to meet you too.
Let's go ahead and finish then, Ronnie.
Oh, I'm not quite sure where I cut off, but I was saying that one of the reasons we're most excited about this breakthrough is that now that the FDA has approved a drug that treats the underlying causes of the disease, we know that's going to escalate more and more research to happen in that field. And so as has happened in other diseases like cancer and heart disease, once that initial drug makes that breakthrough, there's always a surge of other research that happens. And so we're hopeful that this will eventually lead us to that time when we can announce, hey, we finally have the cure for this disease.
Well, I think one of the things that has evolved from COVID is that we spend time focusing on the ills that we face as a society, and now all of a sudden we're coming up with these conclusive results, which will then make people start thinking, hey, if we keep researching, we keep developing, we'll find a resource for all of these ills that we face, and that's what we need to do as a society. So it's really a good thing. So I commend your organization. Keep on spending that money, making it better for folks like myself to get better as we get older. And I may have to come over one day because I forget my name every now and then. But that's not a bad thing. Let me ask you, Bill, Dr. Bill Cosgrove is probably on every board in America. And I'm going to ask you to tell me that. How many boards are you, or advocacy roles do you play out here in the community?
I haven't counted up recently, but it was last year, it was more than 24 boards and councils and committees. And one of the adventures that we get to take when we're retired is we can start saying yes to anybody who requests. We say, what I've been doing to lead an adventurous life is say, oh, sure, I'll give that speech. Oh, sure, I'll be on that board. Oh, yeah, thank you for inviting me. I'll show up for that. And it's been a challenging but fun roller coaster ride to be involved in so many things. And Like Ronnie was talking, it isn't just money that needs to be invested in for our society to move forward. The fact that we will spend the money shows that there's a social and a political commitment to try to make our lives better, and that social and political commitment is what energizes the scientists to really go all in and focus their intelligence and their hard work to try to come up with breakthroughs. The money buys them the lab equipment, but it's that social message that this is important and we, the whole community, think it's important is what really gets the work done. So it's, and like the whole COVID response, what we put our minds to, we've got brilliant minds scattered throughout all of those, all across the nation. Once we get put our communal minds to something, we can conquer it.
Sure.
Absolutely. And that makes me want to give Chloe a compliment, because as a young person, agreeing to let Grandpa steer her into this podcast to listen shows that she's on the fast track of learning and understanding. Chloe, is there anything you want to say? I mean, you got a grandpa who's getting older. You got a grandmother who's older. You got a mother who's on her way. How do you fit in all this in terms of how you think about it? I know you're planning on college soon and nursing, but what are your thoughts about this? What is it you want to get from understanding all of these, I won't say ills, but subject matters that we're about to deal with as we get older?
I think the main thing I really have to focus on is making sure that I'm able to be there for the people who are getting older around me, and that my siblings are able to be there, and my cousins and uncles and aunts and everyone who is younger than these people. We need to make sure that we're healthy and physically active so we can help take care of our older generation. I'd say during COVID, it's really been an eye-opener of how many older people were around, because it showed you how many people you could and couldn't correspond with in person. You know, it showed that like you really have to be cautious because so-and-so is sick, or so-and-so is getting older and is in the high risk category. So it showed who was older and whether they wanted it to be a light to be shown on them or not, you know? And COVID also helped show that there's a big difference between the younger generation and the older generation. It showed our different ways of thinking and how we were mentally and physically and just like health altogether. So
you're really getting prepared to deal with this. But most importantly, I think one of your jobs is to reach back and let the young people who may not necessarily be following this career curve, may not even be following life like you are, let them know the things that they need to be aware of.
right.
Very good. So let me ask you, Ronnie, what happens now with the discovery or the introduction of this drug? What happens now? How do we get it? How do we sign up to know that we can need it and use it?
Sure. So obviously, since this was just announced, it's going to take a couple of months for the manufacturer to ramp up so that there's a nationwide, even a worldwide supply of this drug. But the first step, though, is really related to diagnosis, because the only way that someone can get this drug is if they've been diagnosed with Alzheimer's disease or mild cognitive impairment because of Alzheimer's. And so that's the first step that for most people that are thinking about this might be beneficial to them or a loved one, is to get them in to see their doctor, get them diagnosed, so that then they are in the queue, so to speak, so that when this drug becomes available, this is will become a drug that can be diagnosed by any healthcare professional. So there's no special recommendations or special study that anyone needs to be involved with in order to qualify for it. They just need to have that diagnosis first. So we expect, and that's actually something that in the Alzheimer's Association we know that is a big challenge right now, is that there are not enough people who have been properly diagnosed with this disease. When I mentioned 6 million people in the United States. That's just people that we know of that have received a diagnosis. It probably could be, twice that much or 3 times that much that are actually living with, particularly with mild cognitive impairment, because they just have not yet been diagnosed by a doctor. So we're hoping that this will spur and increase the number of people who have these conversations with their healthcare professionals. This is not a disease that people like to talk about. I referred to cancer earlier, and 40 or 50 years ago, people didn't want to say the C word. People don't want to talk about that, and that's kind of where Alzheimer's disease is today. That people just don't want to talk about it. They don't want to think that there could be anything wrong with their their mental capacities or their thinking or cognition. But that's the important thing, and I love what Chloe said about generations looking to help one another, because it's oftentimes Chloe's generation that might see the first signs of cognitive decline in you as her grandfather, James. That she might be picking up on those little subtle signs that you might not remember the words you want to speak, or that you forget why you've gone into a room. And it's important for family members to have those conversations with their loved ones as well, and say, hey, let's go get this checked out. And my wife and I are dealing with this right now with her mother. Her mother lives in Calgary, Canada, so we're trying to help her through this process, living 12 hours away here in Utah. And it's a challenge for her, and to get her siblings involved with this, and to help them all come together and agree that this is the challenge that her mom's living with. And so it's a generational thing. We all need to step up and really start having these critical conversations about our cognitive abilities. And and when we see that decline, just like there's no same thing comparative. If Chloe saw that you were having the signs of stroke, she would rush you to the hospital right away, right? But that's the same thing needs to happen. If she starts to see the signs of cognitive decline, she needs to help you get that medical help right.
Great. Is there a certain age that we should start taking cognitive exams or tests or whatever? Is there a certain age that we should start that?
Well, we recommend that when someone turns age 65 and then they qualify for, at that point, you can qualify for your annual wellness visit with your doctor. It's no charge at that point. And so we really encourage you to, when you go in to have that annual wellness visit, to ask your doctor for a cognitive assessment. Because at that point, you can create a baseline. And then every year when you go back for that, they can redo that test and see if there's been any kind of decline. And that could simply be the entree to seeing when that mild cognitive impairment might be taking place, to start looking at this kind of drug like Aducanumab.
So it's the time now to start paying attention. I mean, when our children were kids, we used to put the markers on the door jambs, 3 feet, 4 feet, 5 feet. That might not be a bad idea in the families to start putting the markers somewhere. Say, we need this type of checkup. We need to do this kind of thing and all of that. What do you think about that, Dr. Bill?
Well, one of the things back before we had many tools against cancer, people didn't want to talk about it. People didn't want to think about it, didn't want to be diagnosed because it seemed hopeless.
Right.
When we didn't have any cures or treatments for AIDS, people didn't want to think about it, didn't want to know they had it because it felt hopeless. And the difference now today is that there's a little glimmer of hope for Alzheimer's. So now it can move into the daylight. We can talk about it because it isn't just a diagnosis that says to grandma that you're failing and we can't do anything about it.
Right.
We can now say, hey, there's a problem and we can do something about it. So the difference is hope allows us to talk about it. And the more we talk about it, the more we share information, the more people are willing to be tested, the more we're going to understand about it. And that means we're going to develop more tools about it. So it's really an important evolution to have even one tool in the toolbox.
So, one of the biggest challenges that researchers tell us about, James, is that they don't have enough people to get involved in their clinical studies and their trials. And so that, just as Dr. Cosgrove said, I think that's an important thing, that's part of this conversation is, volunteer for clinical trials and get involved with that. because that's what's going to help advance the science even more rapidly as people get involved with that. You know, in particular, we know, for instance, that here in our society, in this study from Aducanumab is a prime example of that. We know that 80% of all the participants in the trials for this drug were Caucasian, and there was less than a 20% group of people who were minority communities. And we know that minority communities are more affected by Alzheimer's disease than Caucasians. And so that's even more important for African American population, Hispanic population to get involved with clinical trials so that we can be assured that these breakthroughs are going to be effective for everyone who might be affected by this disease.
And I think a lot of that has to do with income status or people are fearful that they have to spend money to go to a doctor, and therefore they are on a budget or fixed income. And so they go, I'd rather buy the bread than go see the doctor, even though going and see the doctor will enable them to make the money to get the bread, you know? So we have to explain to our different societal categories, if you will, that good health is part of great wellness. Great wellness will enable you to live a better life, and that's the first step. So we have to start talking to that issue, and I think that we're well on track to doing that. And I want to commend your organization for really reaching out with a very broad paintbrush. And I know that, Doctor, you have been on all of these advocacy boards talking to the issues and everything. Chloe, we're about to close, and so I want to ask you, or do you have any questions you would like to ask either of these gentlemen?
No, not as of right now. I'm just like soaking in all the information because I didn't know this much about Alzheimer's or anything.
Good. I like to spring those surprises on you, you know. Hey, well, gentlemen, thank you very much. Yes.
James, before we, I would like to offer some advice to Chloe. First of all, I'd like to thank her for, it takes courage to go into healthcare. Healthcare is where you, really all healthcare, it isn't about the money. It's the fact that you're dedicating your life to help somebody else, usually some stranger. And that will exact a physical and an emotional cost from you. And it takes courage to make that leap. And thank you for that, your courage. And I'd also like to say another thank you to Ronnie in that the Alzheimer's Association focused our attention, but the fact that there's now $3.5 billion devoted to helping the elderly. Now, when you realize that many societies in our world today, once you stop being productive, once you stop going to work and making a product, that you are seen as less valuable. You're no longer contributing goods to the community, and people then think you're dispendable. And this shows our community values the lives of everyone, including those who are no longer are productive in the manufacturing sense. And that is a step forward for our society to recognize the value of every single person, from an infant to an elderly person in a care facility. Our society is willing to invest goods, services, money, talent in making sure each of those lives are lived with dignity, which is a catchphrase of my friend James.
Right, for sure. And James, I'll just wrap up and thanks Chloe as well for being here. And if Chloe or any of your other listeners want to get more information about Alzheimer's disease, they can go to the Alzheimer's Association website that is just simply at alz.org and learn all about the disease, as well as all the other types of dementia that our organization works with. And then finally, we have a 24/7 helpline that anyone can call and talk to a specialist to get more information. And that number is 1-800-272-3900.
Hey, I want to thank all of you. Chloe, I love you very much, and thank you for trusting your grandpa and bringing you on this journey with me, and I'm real proud of you. Dr. Bill, until we fly again, you know my heart's with you, my friend. Ronnie, you do great work. God bless you. I'm James Brown, and you're not. And we're all living and aging with pride, and that's what it's all about, making a difference in our community. And this is what the example is. Until next time, you guys have a great one. God bless you, and I love you.
Thanks.